At 59 dead and 527 wounded, Sunday night's Las Vegas massacre is now the worst mass public shooting in U.S. history. As is usually the case with such gun-related tragedies, within hours, social media and political punditry was abuzz with talk of gun control and Second Amendment rights, with both the left and the right marshaling their data and arguments. The two most common arguments made in defense of gun ownership are 1, self-protection, and 2, as a bulwark against tyranny. Let's consider each of these. Stories about the use of guns in self-defense, a good guy with a gun dispensing with a bad guy with a gun, are common among gun enthusiasts and conservative talk radio. But a 1998 study in the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery found that, quote, every time a gun in the home was used in self-defense or legally justified shooting, there were 4 unintentional shootings, 7 criminal assaults and homicides, and 11 attempted or completed suicides. That means a gun is 22 times more likely to be used in a criminal assault, an accidental death or injury, a suicide attempt, or a homicide than it is for self-defense. A 2003 study published in the journal Annals of Emergency Medicine examined gun ownership levels among thousands of murder and suicide victims, comparing households with and without guns, and found that having guns in the home was associated with a 41% increase in homicide and a 244% increase in suicide. Yes, the Second Amendment protects your right to own a gun, but having one in your home involves a risk-benefit calculation you should seriously consider. If you have a gun, keep it stored in a lockbox, hidden from children and thieves, and practice shooting it at ranges periodically, so if you do have to use it, you know what you're doing. Watch some of the many videos online of people accidentally shooting themselves and others. It would be comical if it weren't so tragic. That guns stand as a deterrent against tyrannical governments is explicitly evoked in the Second Amendment's wording of, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, that made sense in the 1770s when breech-loading flintlock muskets were the primary weapons tyrants used to conquer other peoples and subdue their own citizens, who could in turn equalize the power equation by arming themselves with equivalent firepower. That is no longer true. If you think stockpiling firearms from the local guns and guitars store, where the Las Vegas shooter purchased some of his weapons, and dressing up in camouflage fatigues and body armor is going to protect you from the U.S. military's tanks and armored vehicles delivering Navy SEALs to your door, you're delusional. The tragic outcomes of Ruby Ridge and Waco in the 1990s, in which citizens armed to the teeth collided with government agencies and lost badly, is a microcosm of what would happen were the citizenry to rise up violently against the government today. If you're having trouble with the government, hire a lawyer, not a gun. Bureaucrats, politicians, and police fear citizens armed with lawyers more than they do populaces fortified with guns. The latter, they can just shoot. The former means they have to appear before a judge. A civil society based on the rule of law, with a professional military to protect its citizens from external threats, a police force to protect civilians from internal dangers, a criminal justice system to settle disputes between the state and its citizenry peacefully, and a civil court system to enable individuals to resolve conflicts non-violently, has been the primary drivers in the dramatic decline of violence over the past several centuries. States reduce violence by asserting a monopoly on the legitimate use of force, thereby replacing what criminologists call self-help justice, in which individuals settle their own scores and disputes, often violently, such as drug gangs and the mafia. with criminal justice leading overall to a decrease in violence. Homicide rates, for example, have plummeted from almost 1,000 per 100,000 people per year in non-state societies to around 100 per 100,000 people per annum in Western societies from the beginnings of civilization to around the Middle Ages, to about 10 per 100,000 per year by the time of the Revolutionary War, to less than 1 per 100,000 today in Europe. The current homicide rate in America is about 5 times higher than Europe, owing primarily to our deadly combination of guns and gangs. Tyrannical states can and have abused freedom of their citizens, but it's no longer realistic to think that arming citizens to the teeth is going to stop tyranny should it arise. Far superior are nonviolent democratic checks and balances on power, constitutional guardians of civil rights, and legal protections of liberties. Thank you for watching. Check us out at skeptic.com and support our mission to promote science and critical thinking at Patreon.